When considering the reliability of ancient texts, few topics spark as much curiosity and debate as the manuscript evidence supporting the Bible. For centuries, scholars, skeptics, and believers alike have scrutinized the transmission of biblical texts, comparing their manuscript history to that of other revered works from antiquity. Yet, when the dust settles and the evidence is weighed, the Bible stands apart, not only as a spiritual cornerstone, but as a literary marvel, preserved with a fidelity and abundance that outshines other classical writings. To appreciate why the Bible's manuscript evidence is so extraordinary, it's helpful to first understand what is meant by manuscript evidence. Before the invention of the printing press in the 15th century, every book, letter, or document had to be copied by hand. Scribes, working in monasteries, scriptoria, or private homes, painstakingly reproduced texts, word by word and line by line. Each manuscript copy was vulnerable to human error, environmental damage, and loss over time. Thus, the more manuscripts that survive, and the closer they are to the original composition date, the more confidently scholars can reconstruct the original wording. Let's begin by exploring the sheer quantity of biblical manuscripts. When compared to other ancient works, the numbers are astonishing. Take, for instance, the works of Homer. The Iliad, perhaps the most celebrated epic poem of the ancient world, is supported by roughly 1,800 manuscripts, with the earliest substantial copies dating from about 400 years after Homer's time. Plato, another giant of antiquity, fares even less well. Only about 250 manuscripts of his work survive, with the earliest significant copies appearing over a millennium after he lived. Contrast this with the New Testament. There are more than 5,800 Greek manuscripts of the New Testament alone, ranging from tiny fragments to complete books. When you include translations into Latin, Coptic, Syriac, and other ancient languages, the number of manuscripts swells to over 25,000. The earliest fragment of the New Testament, known as the John Rylands Papyrus, p52, dates to within a century of the original composition, an almost unparalleled proximity in the world of ancient literature. Whole books and nearly complete copies, such as Codex Sinaiticus and Codex Vaticanus, date to the 4th century, just a few generations removed from the originals. The Old Testament too boasts impressive manuscript support, though its history is more complex. For centuries, the oldest complete Hebrew manuscripts available to scholars dated to the Middle Ages, around the 10th century AD. Critics once argued that this gap of over 1,000 years between the original writings and the earliest copies left the Old Testament text open to significant corruption. However, the discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls in the mid-20th century revolutionized our understanding. These scrolls, hidden in caves near Qumran and dating as far back as the 3rd century BC, included portions from every book of the Hebrew Bible except Esther. When compared to the later Masoretic text, the Dead Sea Scrolls revealed a remarkable consistency, demonstrating that the core content of the Old Testament had been faithfully preserved across the centuries. But quantity is only part of the story. The quality and transparency of the biblical manuscript tradition are equally noteworthy. Unlike many ancient works, where later scribes sometimes altered or improved the text without acknowledgement, biblical copyists developed meticulous systems to safeguard accuracy. Jewish scribes, especially those responsible for the Hebrew scriptures, counted every letter, word, and verse, ensuring that any deviation would be detected and corrected. Errors, when found, were marked or noted rather than erased, preserving a transparent record of the transmission process. In the Christian tradition, early church leaders recognized the importance of maintaining the integrity of their sacred texts. While minor variations inevitably crept in, misspellings, skipped lines, or word substitutions, modern textual critics can identify and correct these through a process called textual criticism. By comparing the thousands of available manuscripts, scholars can trace the history of each variant and reconstruct the original text with a high degree of confidence. In fact, the vast number of manuscripts, far from being a liability, is a strength. It allows for cross-checking and correction, reducing the likelihood that errors or intentional changes would go undetected or uncorrected. Now, let's consider the time gap between the original composition of a work and its earliest surviving manuscripts. For many ancient classics, this gap is vast. The works of Tacitus, the Roman historian, survive in just a handful of manuscripts. the earliest of which dates to about 900 years after he wrote. Caesar's Gallic Wars is supported by only about 10 good manuscripts, none earlier than 9 centuries after the events described. In contrast, the New Testament's earliest fragments appear within decades of the originals, and complete books within a few centuries. This narrow window dramatically reduces the opportunity for legendary embellishment, myth-making, or wholesale textual corruption. This isn't to say that the biblical manuscripts are free from differences or variants. On the contrary, the sheer volume of manuscripts ensures that thousands of minor differences exist. However, the overwhelming majority of these variants are trivial, spelling errors, word order changes, or slips of the pen. Only a tiny fraction affect the meaning of a passage, and none alter the core doctrines or historical claims of Christianity or Judaism. Leading textual critics, including those who are not themselves religious, have concluded that we can be more certain about the original wording of the New Testament than any other work from antiquity. Another way the Bible outshines other classics is through the diversity and geographical spread of its manuscripts. The New Testament, for example, was copied and circulated throughout the Mediterranean world, Greece, Asia Minor, Egypt, Rome, and beyond. This means that even if a scribe in Alexandria made a mistake or introduced a change, copies in Antioch or Rome would preserve the original reading. This cross-pollination of textual traditions acts as a safeguard, allowing scholars to sift through regional variants and reconstruct the earliest attainable text. In addition to Greek and Hebrew manuscripts, the Bible's early translations, called versions by scholars, provide another layer of evidence. Within a few centuries of the New Testament's composition, it was translated into Latin, Coptic, Syriac, Armenian, and other languages. These translations, some of which survive in ancient manuscripts, offer valuable insight into how the text was understood and transmitted in diverse cultural contexts. By comparing the readings in these early versions with the Greek originals, scholars can further confirm the stability of the biblical text. The Bible's manuscript tradition is also unique in its openness to scrutiny. While some religious or philosophical traditions have restricted access to their sacred texts, the Bible has been copied, translated, and studied by countless hands across the centuries. From the earliest days of Christianity, believers were encouraged to read and share the scriptures. This openness has resulted in a rich, complex, and well-documented manuscript history, one that invites investigation rather than secrecy. Moreover, the Bible's influence on Western civilization has ensured that its preservation has been a matter of immense cultural and religious importance. Kings, emperors, monks, and ordinary believers have all played a role in copying, protecting, and transmitting the biblical text. The invention of the printing press only accelerated this process, making it possible to compare printed editions with ancient manuscripts and further refine our understanding of the original text. It's also worth noting the role of archaeology in confirming the Bible's textual reliability. Discoveries such as the Dead Sea Scrolls, the Nash Papyrus, and the Chester Beatty Papyri have consistently affirmed the accuracy of the biblical text as it has come down to us. These finds, often made in remote caves or ancient rubbish heaps, have provided independent confirmation of the manuscript tradition, sometimes pushing our earliest evidence back by centuries. The meticulous care with which the Bible was copied is evident in the practices of Jewish scribes, known as the Masoretes. Working between the 6th and 10th centuries AD, the Masoretes developed an elaborate system of notes, vowel points, and accent marks to preserve the pronunciation and meaning of the Hebrew text. They counted not only the words but the letters in each book, marking the middle word and letter to ensure accuracy. If a copy was found to have even a single error, it was often destroyed or set aside. This reverence for the text, coupled with rigorous methods, ensured that the Old Testament was transmitted with extraordinary fidelity. Christian scribes, too, took their task seriously. While early Christian communities often faced persecution and hardship, they prioritized the copying and sharing of the scriptures. Letters from the apostles were read aloud in churches, copied, and circulated widely. The rapid spread of Christianity meant that the New Testament was soon being translated into multiple languages, further increasing the number and diversity of manuscripts. When comparing the Bible's manuscript evidence to that of other classics, the difference is striking. Consider the works of Herodotus, the father of history. only about 100 manuscripts of his histories survive, with the earliest significant copy dating from over 1,000 years after he wrote. Aristotle, whose writings have shaped Western philosophy, is represented by only about 50 manuscripts, most of them quite late. Yet these works are accepted as generally reliable representations of what their authors wrote. The Bible, by contrast, is supported by thousands of manuscripts, many of them ancient, and a wealth of early translations and citations. Church fathers such as Clement, Ignatius, and Polycarp, writing in the 1st and 2nd centuries, quoted extensively from the New Testament, providing yet another avenue for verifying the text. In fact, it has been said that if every manuscript of the New Testament were lost, the entire text could be reconstructed from the quotations found in early Christian writings. Of course, the Bible's manuscript evidence is not the only factor to consider when evaluating its reliability or significance. Questions of authorship, historical accuracy, and interpretation remain the subject of lively debate. Yet, when it comes to the preservation and transmission of the text itself, the Bible stands in a class by itself. Its abundance of manuscripts, proximity to the originals, geographical diversity, and transparent transmission process combine to make it the best attested work of ancient literature. This unparalleled manuscript evidence has important implications. For one, it means that modern readers can approach the Bible with a high degree of confidence that they are reading essentially the same words that were written millennia ago. While no ancient text has been transmitted without some variation, the differences in the biblical manuscripts are well documented, thoroughly studied, and rarely significant. The core message and content of the Bible have been preserved with a fidelity unmatched by any other ancient work. Furthermore, the Bible's manuscript tradition serves as a model for the study of other ancient texts. The methods developed by biblical scholars, collating manuscripts, analyzing variants, reconstructing original readings, have been applied to the works of Homer, Plato, and other classics. In this sense, the Bible has not only outshined other works in terms of evidence, but has also advanced the broader field of textual criticism. It's also instructive to consider the motivations behind the preservation of the Bible. For the communities that treasured these texts, the scriptures were not merely literary artifacts, but the very words of God, or inspired witnesses to his actions in history. This conviction inspired extraordinary efforts to copy, preserve, and transmit the text with accuracy and reverence. The result is a manuscript tradition that reflects both human diligence and a deep sense of sacred responsibility. The story of the Bible's transmission is, in many ways, a story of faithfulness, of scribes laboring by candlelight, of communities risking persecution to preserve their sacred writings, of scholars devoting lifetimes to the study of ancient texts. It is a story that spans continents and centuries, languages and cultures, yet converges on a single remarkable fact. The Bible, more than any other work from antiquity, has survived the ravages of time with its text intact. In the modern era, advances in technology have only enhanced our ability to study and compare biblical manuscripts. Digital imaging, multispectral analysis, and online databases have made it possible for scholars around the world to examine ancient texts in unprecedented detail. Every year, new discoveries are made, new manuscripts come to light, and our understanding of the Bible's textual history grows richer. Yet for all the advances in scholarship, the basic facts remain unchanged. The Bible's manuscript evidence is unparalleled. Its text has been preserved with extraordinary care. Its message has endured across the ages, reaching billions of people in every corner of the globe. For those who approach the Bible as a work of literature, its manuscript tradition is a marvel of human achievement, a testament to the power of words to endure. For those who see it as sacred scripture, the evidence of its preservation is a cause for gratitude and awe. When the Bible is compared to other classics of antiquity, the contrast is clear. The works of Homer, Plato, Aristotle, and Tacitus, though invaluable in their own right, simply do not enjoy the same abundance, antiquity, or transparency of manuscript support. Their texts have survived against the odds, often by the slimmest of margins. The Bible, by contrast, has been preserved in a multitude of manuscripts in a diversity of languages, copied and cherished by generations of believers. This abundance of evidence does not guarantee that every word has come down to us unchanged, nor does it settle every question of interpretation or meaning. But it does mean that the Bible's text is, by any reasonable standard, the best attested work of ancient literature. It means that its words, whether read for faith, study, or curiosity, rest on a foundation of evidence unmatched by any other book from the ancient world. In summary, the Bible's manuscript evidence stands out in several key ways. The sheer number of manuscripts, far exceeding those of other ancient works, provides a wealth of data for reconstructing the original text. The proximity of the earliest manuscripts to the time of composition narrows the window for textual corruption. The geographical diversity of the manuscripts acts as a safeguard against regional errors or changes. Early translations and citations offer additional layers of confirmation. The meticulous care of scribes, both Jewish and Christian, has ensured the preservation of the text across centuries and continents. And the openness of the tradition invites ongoing study, scrutiny, and discovery. As we reflect on the story of the Bible's transmission, we are reminded of the enduring power of words, the dedication of those who preserve them, and the remarkable journey of a book that has shaped the course of history. Whether approached as literature, history, or sacred scripture, the Bible's manuscript evidence shines as a beacon of reliability, outshining other classics and inviting each new generation to explore its pages with confidence and wonder.